There have been many brave people throughout history who've risked everything they have for something bigger and greater than themselves. These people are our heroes. They come in many different forms: male, female, short and tall. Historical wars have generated diamonds in the rough in the form of liberation fighters who've long outperformed their abilities. War has a variety of outcomes, and soldiers give their all to ensure victory for their country. Soldiers are never limited by factors like gender, age, or physical fragility when it comes to patriotism and matters of national respect. And many go through extremely challenging physical and mental transformations to become the person they're needed to be at their pivotal moment in time. 4. Freddie and Truce Overstegen. Freddie Overstegen joined the Dutch resistance during World War II when she was only 14 years old and quickly became one of its armed assassins. Freddie's sister Truce was by her side, as well as a young lady named Hannie Schaft, and the three of them ambushed, lured, and killed German Nazis and their Dutch collaborators. Freddie and Truce had a single working-class mother who raised them in the city of Haarlem. Their mother was a self-proclaimed communist, which resulted in her teaching her daughters the same, preaching the importance of fighting social injustice. She took Jewish refugees into her home after Europe hit the brink of war in 1939. The Nazis then invaded the Netherlands in May 1940, beginning an occupation that would last until the end of the war. In response, the girls teamed up with their mother to distribute anti-Nazi newspapers and pamphlets for the resistance. We also glued warnings across German posters in the street, calling on men to work in Germany. Freddie later recalled in interviews with anthropologist Ellis Jonker, which were published in the book Under Fire: Women and World War II. And then we'd hurry off on our bikes. Such actions were not only subversive but also very dangerous. If the Nazis or Dutch police had caught the sisters in the act, they could have killed them. However, because they were both young girls, officials were less likely to suspect them. This could have been one of the reasons why a commander with the Haarlem resistance group came to their house in 1941 to ask their mother if he could recruit Freddie and Truce. Their mother accepted, and the sisters agreed to join. Only later did he tell us what we'd actually have to do: sabotage bridges and railway lines, Truce told Jonker. And learn to shoot Nazis, she continued. I remember my sister saying, well, that's something I've never done before. In one case, Truce lured an SS officer into the woods to his death. As their recruiter had stated, the girls learned how to use guns and soon started to go on assassination missions on their own. Later, they concentrated on assassinating Dutch collaborators who arrested or threatened Jewish refugees and resistance members. Freddie was particularly good at pursuing a target or keeping a watchful eye during missions because she appeared so young and innocent. Both sisters used lethal force, but they never disclosed the number of Nazis and Dutch collaborators they killed. Other responsibilities in the Haarlem resistance group included transporting Jewish refugees to a new hiding place, working in the Enschede Emergency Hospital, and blowing up the railway line between Ismuiden and Haarlem. They joined forces with Hannie Schaft in 1943. Hannie was a former university student who dropped out after refusing to sign a German loyalty oath. The three young women banded together to form a sabotage and assassination cell. Hannie had become their best friend, and the sisters were heartbroken when the Nazis arrested and killed her in 1945, just 3 weeks before the war in Europe ended. According to legend, after being wounded by her executioner, Hannie's last words were, "I'm a better shot." The sisters had to deal with the trauma of killing people and losing their best friend after the war. Truce later spoke and wrote about their experiences in the resistance. As she told Vice Netherlands in 2016, Freddie coped by getting married and having babies. But the experience of war still caused her to lose sleep at night. In another interview, Freddie described seeing a person she'd shot fall to the ground and feeling compelled to help him. Truce died in 2016, and Freddie died on September 5, 2018, one day before she turned 93. Throughout their long lives, the Dutch failed to recognize the women's accomplishments and dismissed them as communists. In 2014, they were awarded the Mobilisatie Oorlogskreuz, or War Mobilization Cross, in recognition of their service to their country. Before we continue on with our heroes, tell us in the comments who your hero is, and hit subscribe while you're at it. 3. Hans and Sophie Scholl. Two German college students entered one of the main campus buildings at the University of Munich on February 18, 1943, at the height of World War II. They walked to the top of a staircase and threw a stack of leaflets over the railing and into the crowded atrium. The leaflet, the sixth in a series of underground publications from The White Rose, urged fellow students to rise up against Adolf Hitler and the Nazi war machine. The janitor grabbed the students, who tossed the booklets and handed them over to the Gestapo, the Nazi secret police. The two students were siblings by the names of Hans and Sophie Scholl. Within days, Hans and Sophie, as well as their friend Christoph Probst, were charged with treason and executed. Many of their White Rose resistance movement co-conspirators were executed within months of that. Sophie Scholl's name is now synonymous in Germany with bravery, conviction, and the inspiring power of youth. Sophie fought a murderous regime at the age of 21, not with weapons or grenades, but with thoughts and ideals. Sophie was born in 1921 into a Christian family. When Hitler and his National Socialist Party took power, she was 12 years old. Despite her parents' opposition to the Nazi Party, she excitedly took part in Nazi-run youth programs, the Hitler Youth for Boys and the League of German Girls for Girls. Sophie quickly climbed the ranks for her optimism and leadership abilities. However, by the time she graduated, Germany was deep in war, and among those drafted were her boyfriend and two of her brothers. She had shifted from a proud patriotism to a deep sorrow for people who were dying on the front lines. She feared for her friends and family, and despised the fascist police state that sadly controlled their every waking move. Sophie, who was intelligent and ambitious, wished to study biology and philosophy at university, but was forced to spend a year in the National Labor Service, where she despised the military regimen and boring chores. In her journal entries and letters to her boyfriend, there's a young woman yearning for peace and freedom. Sophie enrolled at the University of Munich in 1942, where her older brother Hans was already a student of medicine. Hans and his friends were conscripted as medics on the Eastern Front, where they witnessed crimes such as the mass murder of Polish Jews and the unnecessary deaths of endless German soldiers. In June 1942, they could no longer contain their rage at Hitler's criminal regime, so Hans and a small group of like-minded friends founded the White Rose and started to publish and pass out underground booklets calling on ordinary Germans to oppose Nazism. In one of the booklets, Hans and fellow White Rose member Alexander Schmorl strongly called the mass murder of Polish Jews and German concentration camps the most terrible crime against human dignity, a crime for which there is no comparison in the entire history of mankind. In another booklet, the White Rose encouraged ordinary Germans to commit sabotage wherever they worked, in munitions factories, government offices, newspapers, and universities. Every one of us is capable of contributing something to bringing down this system. Sophie joined her brother in the White Rose resistance and assisted in the publication and distribution of booklets throughout Munich and other German cities, which was difficult given rationing and travel restrictions during the war. Please duplicate and pass on, begged the leaflet, hoping that it would reach more Germans objecting to the regime. Sophie and the other White Rose members believed that the tide of the war had turned against Germany by 1943. Germany lost 500,000 troops during the catastrophic Battle of Stalingrad in late 1942, and the White Rose began taking more daring steps to mobilize a disheartened public. The group spray-painted "Freedom" and "Down with Hitler" graffiti all over Munich. Rather than mailing their booklets in secret, they decided to distribute them on campus in person. One of the last booklets that Sophie and Hans threw into the crowded atrium was authored by one of their professors, Kurt Huber, and ended with this hopeful urging: "Our nation is on the verge of rising up against Europe's enslavement through National Socialism in the new, devout breakthrough of freedom and honor." After Sophie was arrested, she initially denied any involvement with the booklets or the White Rose, but after Hans owned up to his role, she confessed as well. "We were convinced that Germany had lost the war and that every life sacrifice for this lost cause was in vain," Sophie explained to her interrogators. "The sacrifice demanded at Stalingrad in particular moved us to do something in opposition to the senseless shedding of blood. I quickly realized that our conduct was intended to bring the current regime to an end." Sophie and Hans attempted to shield the other White Rose members by stating that they were primarily responsible for writing the booklets, but their friends were eventually pulled into the investigation and died by guillotine. Sophie's final words before being led away to be executed were, "It is such a splendid sunny day, and I have to go." But how many have to die on the battlefield these days? How many young, promising lives? What does my death matter if by our actions thousands are warned and alerted? As it happened, the last booklet was smuggled out of Germany and made its way to the United Kingdom and the United States, where ousted German author Thomas Mann appreciated the White Rose members, saying, "Good, splendid young people, a new faith in freedom and honor is dawning. You shall not have died in vain. You shall not be forgotten." 2. Josephine Baker. As war drums rang across Europe in 1939, the head of France's military spy agency enlisted an unlikely spy, Josephine Baker, France's most famous woman. Jacques Abti invested his time at the beginning of World War II trying to recruit spies to gather intelligence on Nazi Germany and other Axis powers. Usually, the chief of the Secret Service desired men who could travel undercover. When it came to the American-born dancer and singer, nothing was ordinary. Baker, who was born into poverty in St. Louis in 1906, grew up without a father in numerous rat-infested places. She had only a scattered school education and was married by the time she was 13 years old. She left Jim Crow America at the age of 19 to perform as a burlesque dancer in the music halls of Paris after experiencing racism. Her risque dance routines while wearing nothing more than a pearl necklace and a rubber banana skirt made her a jazz-age phenomenon. She rose to become Europe's highest-paid entertainer after venturing out into singing and film acting. Baker's celebrity status made her a doubtful spy candidate because she could never travel discreetly, but that's precisely why she was such an appealing candidate. Her cover could be her fame. Abti wanted Baker's charm, beauty, and stardom to be enough to entice secrets from the lips of adoring diplomats at embassy parties. Baker agreed to spy for her adopted country after discovering the freedom that America promised on parchment in France. "France made me who I am," she explained to Abti. "Parisians gave me their hearts, and I am ready to give them my life." Baker kept going with her nightly performances in Paris in the weeks following the German invasion. She sang to soldiers on the front lines over the radio and consoled refugees in homeless shelters. Early in June 1940, as the invaders drew near Paris, Abti insisted that Baker leave. As a result, Baker packed up her belongings, including a gold piano and a bed once owned by Marie Antoinette, and left for a chateau 300 miles to the southwest. She hid refugees and French resistance members in her new quarters as Nazi troops marched down the Champs-Élysées and occupied her Paris home. She worked with the French resistance network in North Africa and used her connections to safeguard passports for Jews escaping the Nazis in Eastern Europe, until she was hospitalized in June 1941 with peritonitis. During an 18-month hospitalization, she underwent numerous operations and became so ill that the Chicago Defender published her obituary, written by Langston Hughes. He wrote that Baker was as much a victim of Hitler as the troops who fall today in Africa fighting his armies. Josephine was driven away from her beloved Paris by the Aryans. Baker immediately corrected the record. "There has been a slight error. I'm much too busy to die," she said. As Baker recovered, American diplomats and French resistance members gathered at her bedside to continue the spy work. In November 1942, she watched from her balcony as American soldiers came to Morocco as part of Operation Torch. After being discharged, Baker traveled to all the Allied military camps from Algiers to Jerusalem. By day, she drove jeeps across North Africa's scorching deserts. To avoid landmines, she wrapped up and slept on the ground next to her vehicle at night. After a 4-year absence, she returned to Paris following its liberation in October 1944. Baker rode in the back of a car, dressed in her blue Air Auxiliary lieutenant's uniform with gold epaulets, as the crowd on the Champs-Élysées tossed her flowers. She was more than just a glamorous star. She was a national hero. 1. Albina Mali-Hokova. Slovenian resistance fighter Albina Mali-Hokova served during one of Eastern Europe's darkest periods. Albina was born in Vinica, North Macedonia in September 1925 and was one of 8 children in a working-class family. Sadly, her father became ill and died several years after the family moved to Jerka Vas when she was in 3rd grade. When Germany invaded Yugoslavia in 1941, Albina joined the People's Liberation Movement and fought in the People's Liberation War of Yugoslavia. She was quickly recognized for her skills and abilities, and higher-ranking staff trusted her enough to use her to relay information and act as a liaison. She moved to Česká Vas with her mother following a 3-month stint in Novo Mesto and began serving as a contact point between several cities. Unfortunately, politics and betrayal caused an Axis offensive of liberated territory, and in the middle of 1942, Albina found herself enlisting in the League of Communist Youth of Yugoslavia and serving in the 3rd Battalion, 3rd Company of the 1st Slovenian Brigade. By December of that year, Albina, who was serving as a nurse and battalion secretary at the time, eventually took part in fighting across the country. She suffered several injuries between late 1942 and late 1943, including those that resulted in major deformation of her face and the loss of an eye. Albina was photographed at some point during this period, and the photograph became an iconic image that would continue to resurface in the public's mind for years to come. Albina had been assigned to medical duties by 1945, even working as a flying nurse, a critical position that exposed her to the dangers of both enemy fire and the dangers of aviation technology that was still in its infancy. She was awarded the Yugoslavian Order of the Partizan Star, 3rd class, for her unwavering courage in the face of perilous circumstances. Albina attempted to start a new life after the war, ultimately becoming a notable member of the government. She passed away on January 24, 2001. Thanks for watching. Which one of these heroes inspired you the most? Tell us in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye.